Hi, welcome, and thank you for staying for our talk back with the playwrights and directors of History of Love and The World is Sad. So I'm going to introduce you briefly to all of these artists. So first is Elizabeth Dinkova, is an itinerant director and adapter from Bulgaria, and a recent graduate of the MFA directing program at the Yale School of Drama. She currently lives in Atlanta, where she was the Artistic Leadership Fellow in 1718 at the Alliance Theater in Atlanta. And now she's teaching at the University of California in Riverside from Atlanta. So thank you for coming, Elizabeth. And our next playwright is Jacob Zack. He's an actor playwright who is from New Jersey and now lives in Washington, D.C. He studied acting at Emory University in Atlanta and moved to South America for a year or so teaching English. Then he returned to Washington and he's a researcher at the U.S. Institute of Peace. And if you're from Washington, it's this really cool building with these great roofs. It's an outstanding a landmark here. And he is he's studying for his master's, and we are really pleased that he's here and given us this great play. Hello, Jacob. And our directors are Shanara, Gabrielle. She is a theater artist working in a wide variety of mediums with a focus on gutsy, inventive, engaging theater for all audiences. Driven by exploring stories of justice and tales of imagination, she's interested in creating new work and reimagining traditional texts with artists of courage and depth. Shanara has worked professionally in theaters all over the country, but here in Washington, she's worked at Arena Stage, Signature, the Shakespeare Theater Company, and Imagination Stage plus others. Our other playwright is Robert Bowen Smith. He's an actor choreographer based in the DC metro area, and he has acted and choreographed for many theaters here, including Theater Alliance, Keegan, Imagination Stage, First Stage, Rorschach, Cinetic, and Spooky Action, where he is an entangled artist. He's been nominated for 2 Helen Hayes Awards for Outstanding Choreography. So, welcome, artists. So, we have these 2 really interesting plays that are both domestic in feel and international in theme and tone. So I just kind of want to start there. So let's start with you, Jacob. How does your work in foreign policy field impact or inform the themes that you grapple with as a playwright, one? And how does your background as an actor influence your playwriting?
Well, thanks very much, Gillian. Thanks for having me, and thanks for hosting this conversation. I think balancing working in foreign policy on the one hand and writing dark, absurdist comedies on the other, I've really come to appreciate just how much of our foreign policy and our domestic policy is a work of dark comedy. I think I'm often quite disturbed by the things that I read or experience, the conversations that I have as an MA candidate at Georgetown School of Foreign Service. The conversations about what does national security mean and for whom and at what costs to people of color at home and abroad. These things are profoundly disturbing to me, and my process is to laugh and to find ways where I can find comedy in these themes. There's much less comedy to be found in The World is Sand. However, as Beth and I discussed at length, there are still moments of levity to be found sort of in the darkest corners of the foreign policy world. And for better or for worse, it has a profound impact on my writing. Um, and then in terms of my background as an actor, um, I always try to write from the perspective of an actor to give actors beats and lines that they can really work with, um, and I want to provide a script that I would want to work on as an actor, and something that I would want to look at and say, wow, I really want to sink my teeth into this. And so on the one hand, it influences my writing, but also watching the actors work on my plays, it always teaches me so much about how I can grow as a writer. And so that's sort of how the actor in me plays a part as well.
Well, it's interesting with this play. So this play is these women trapped in um, some kind of cave, grave house, and the world is around them, and all of the politics you're talking about them is is crushing them, right? And so how you are talking about, and I'd like you to talk about the uh, the the themes of the international themes in this play, but how what I saw, which is really beautiful, you chose to sort of make it manifest through this intimate dialogue of these two intimately connected women, and yet it's all about the politics in its own little way. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit about how that was formed, and I mean, you have both of you right there in the making of this play, which is really not all that funny. That's true. So talk about the juxtaposition of the politics and the personal here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think politics are personal in a lot of ways, and especially when you're dealing with themes related to US imperialism abroad. There are real costs to our actions in Washington, D.C., in crafting policy and what we decide and how we decide to project power into the world. Um, this play came about because I was my academic background is in Middle Eastern studies, and I was taking a course on war crimes and genocide. And so I was focusing on the Lebanese Civil War.
Aha.
And so this play is, I was reading firsthand survivor accounts of a specific set of massacres that were occurring. And this play was how I was processing being immersed in those materials. Um, and so I'm very cognizant of the fact that there are some serious limits as a white male from the United States trying to write about these things. And that's why I was so thrilled and grateful to have these actors work on this piece, because two Muslim Pakistani women giving me feedback, telling me which lines make sense to them from their own experience and which lines don't, working with me on the text. I mean, what greater gift could a playwright ask for than that sort of engagement? So I would say the actors taught me a lot about that interconnection between the political and the personal.
Lovely. Um, and this play doesn't take place in any particular place.
No,
We assume it's taking place someplace in the Middle East, but no country in particular. And you did that on purpose, I'm assuming.
I did that on purpose, and I would even hesitate to say the Middle East because we've adapted several themes to be specific to Pakistan, which I think most people would categorize as Southeastern Asia. So I would say just elsewhere, not in the United States, somewhere in the world.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to now switch to Beth, who directed this. As an international artist yourself, how does your experience with theater internationally inform your work here in America? And also, if you want to talk a little bit about what we just talked about in terms of the international and the politics of this play, that would also be great.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be a part of this because I think that very much like Jacob was suggesting, one of the things that we bonded over initially when we met through this play really was our interest in being global citizens and our commitment to exploring the very much intimately entangled problems of the world, and especially America's complicity in so many of them through adventurous and insightful theatrical forms. As far as my own background as a theater artist from Bulgaria, I come from a theatrical tradition that is very much rooted in folkloric mysticism, which was something that came in very handy when working on this play that feels very, very magical, even as it is very intimate. And also a theatrical tradition that is entirely permeated by Bulgaria's history with authoritarian regimes. So the theater in my country has always been a tool to fight oppression and to envision new ways of being in the world, new political and social structures, and new ways of people relating to each other. And in my decade or so where I've been in and out of the United States, and working and seeing work in other countries, I think the thing that has been very important for me to preserve as I get somewhat assimilated is ultimately this international perspective of ways in which important struggles with racism, with classism, with various kinds of exploitations. Sorry, this is a cat, are framed and experienced in other places, because I do believe ultimately in this kind of utopian notion that if um if different countries, cultures, and people put their insights together in order to try to solve really burning relevant contemporary issues, then there is nothing that could stop them. So I feel like I always seek that kind of unity and diversity through my work. And this play was a really great opportunity to do that, because Jacob was very flexible in extending the cultural material that gets explored in the play to collaborators that I was interested in working with. And Mariam Khalid and Aisha Mohid, who are the two actresses that we worked with, they ultimately brought so much from their own background, with their experience with wars in Pakistan, which Aisha lived through, as well as the situation currently in Kashmir, where we see an informational blackout, and a lot of militarized acts ultimately against Kashmir's citizens that don't actually get a lot of voice um, in international news. So it was a really meaningful experience for all of us together to work in this very non-hierarchical way, learn from each other, engage in this fluid exchange that Jacob was describing, in order to craft a story that feels like it is still rooted in specific cultural landmarks, but ultimately also feels very universal, since women's bodies and women's experiences have been um, endangered and kind of the sites where so much armed conflict across the world takes place.
Right. Thank you. Um, so it was a really beautiful piece, and it and all of that illuminates this background. So it's very interesting. Thank you for that. Robert, let's turn now to history of love. So, in addition to being, so let's talk about backgrounds. So, you have a multi-dimensional background as an actor, a director, and a choreographer, as well as other talents as an artist. How does this affect your work or your approach to work? For instance, in the history of love, it's a play where the story is told almost entirely through movement. So that's a direct application, but it affects a lot of your work. I know that you and I were talking about a project where you started just with photographs and then worked backwards out to create this. And I think you're working on this play that starts on the idea of a photograph. Can you just talk about that multidisciplinary approach to your work?
Yeah, absolutely. The other piece that you're talking about actually still untitled. We're calling it the film noir piece currently, but it actually began as inspiration from a series of photographs that Annie Leibovitz took based on film noir. And she used Hollywood actors and staged them and put them in these very theatrical images. And so by putting those images together, I was able to create a narrative and then work from that and use that as the inspiration, right, to build something. Still a work in progress. But with this piece, it's a very similar thing in that as a choreographer, so frequently I'm trying to create somebody else's story, somebody else's image, somebody else's idea in a very physical, tangible way. I'm trying to find the gesture life, the movement story of characters somebody else wrote and in a story that somebody else created. And more, I've been excited by the idea of creating my own stories for choreography. So I guess Jacob was saying earlier that he writes plays that he wants to act in, right? That he would love to be cast as an actor. And I guess I'm writing things and writing projects that I would like to choreograph, right? That I would like to see put to movement. And I think very much in movement and pictures, and it is a struggle trying to find the words to put those images on stage. And so it's been very exciting working with Shanara and seeing, because she's a beautiful mover and has such a gift for creating movement and choreography as well. So seeing her interpretation and the actors, each of these beautiful actors, their interpretation of the words that I wrote in their bodies and in their story, it's all very exciting. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it did. And you also said, I think in one of our conversations, you said, so this is really good. I get to actually hear the words. I get to hear the words because that's the thing. You feel very connected. You're a writer and you're a director and you're a teacher. Words are part of what you do as an actor. But the fact that they're like almost, the lyrics come almost last, it's interesting kind of process. So it's good to hear these all put together. Is that right?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. So Shanara, Gabrielle, who directed this, you also, I mean, we have these amazing multidisciplinary theater people here. Can you talk about your work as a director, actor, and movement specialist? You know, I think the first time I saw you or was aware of, the first time I saw you in town, I think you were the spider in Charlotte's Web. And didn't you do aerial? Wasn't there like some aerial part of that? And that was the first artist who had done, I forget what that's called.
Yeah, there was aerial silks in Charlotte.
Aerial silks.
Yeah.
That was, and you told the whole story of the spider a lot on silks, which I thought it was really, really moving. So I just wanted to ask you about your multidimensional approach to theater.
Yeah. Well, for Charlotte's Web, I have to give away that brilliant idea to Kate Breyer, who directed that show. I movement directed for her and choreographed the piece, but it was her original idea, and I think a great one. I think it's so interesting that you say, you know, multi-dimensional artists. I think that's what we all are now. You know, I think the people who are continuing to work and move forward, like all of these people here, are all multi-hyphenates. You know, we do more than one thing.
That's really clear now. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's always been a part of me, you know, but I find that like the artists that I want to work with, and definitely all the people that are moving forward, we all have multiple hats that we wear.
Yeah. I mean, just when I started to collecting the directors for these series of impossible plays, which are on Zoom or on film, the director says, "Oh gosh, I so want to flex my filmic muscles because that is absolutely requisite for theater directors now, is to be able to deal with projections and to be able to film and have that particular visual sense, which is a little different." And so I think that that idea that everybody it's much more collaborative, certainly than when I started out in theater, when you were a director or you were an actor or you're a choreographer. And I think the work is incredibly expansive because of all of that goes in it now.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting to see having worked in the film TV world too, I don't think that virtual theater is film. I think we've started to make a few crossroads, but I think we are actually creating a new form, and that's something I've been really interested in, that particularly the liveness of things, even when they're virtual, and sort of what those crossovers are. So not totally diving over into the on-camera TV film world, but really exploring like, what does a 3D world in a live version look like in a 2D format?
Right. It's a really, and everyone's been pondering. This has been a year in which we get to ponder that and experiment and play and see what works and what doesn't. That's certainly been, I mean, what our adventure is here has just been, each time we learn more and more, and it becomes part of our theater vocabulary. So I appreciate that. But about this play, what were you drawn to in this play? And what, if you would like to talk about any personal connection you have to this piece, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I had the pleasure of meeting Rob. We had crossed paths some when I first came to DC, but we had recently connected right before the pandemic for one of the early COVID cancellations of shows. And had known his work as a mover, choreographer, physical thinker, So I was interested just that it was his piece. And I actually didn't know, Rob, that you wrote plays until this one, right? And I was just fascinated at sort of where his mind went in regards to like translating body into text. That was totally fascinating to me. I also, personally have a connection to the story, which I'll try not to give away if people have not seen the story yet, but there's a genetic element to it. And my youngest daughter also has a genetic disorder that is passed down, also has a male or female gene transmission. So there's a very specific part of Rob's story that he told that also just connected to my personal life.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's because that's amazing. It's the mystery in the play, right? It's this unique mystery in the play, and it's interesting to have that connection. And I think I was at your first rehearsal, and you talked a little bit about that. And actually, I'd like you to talk to me about your cast. This large cast for a short play, and you gathered such a great group of. They're also they're very movement oriented actors from all across the country. So how did you find and select these particular people?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was another thing that excited me about Rob's script, is like just having a fairly large cast for a very short little bit of this story. I love that. That's sort of like expansive storytelling in that way. So there was a couple of people that originally came to mind when I was looking at this, sort of the main storyteller for the man and the mature version of that man. One of them, Keith Tyrone Williams, who I had met in St. Louis, is a Dunham technique guy, something I've always been fascinated by, and found those artists and movers so inspirational. And then Devon Moody, who I had also recently connected with here in DC, who comes from just a killer musical theater dance background. And I thought, like, I wonder what that mashup will be of those two people who are playing the same character at different ages. What does that look like when we take improvisational Dunham technique mature man and take a very young, beautiful musical theater mover, and where do those two paths cross? So that, and then also just finding artists of color that really could bring a perspective to this that was not just necessarily Rob and myself and the creative team, which is a white team at this point, just to bring that to sort of open the lens of that story and say, let's be expansive about what this might mean. I've relied on them to create a lot of what the story that you'll see is. So it is theirs as much as it is anyone's.
Well, great. They are, having seen the first rehearsal, they are there are a wide range of personalities as well, and bodies, and I can't wait to see how it all works out. And this series is called the Impossible Play Series because it would be difficult to actually stage them live, and we just then added this extra hardness, impossibility, by asking you to do it on Zoom. So I appreciate the amount of attention and creativity and imagination it took from you and your whole crew to make this happen on Zoom. It was a big challenge. And so I thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was very fun to work on. Very fun.
And Beth, let's just talk about your casting, which you've already told that was a mother-daughter team, but you got to, you said that they gave you very specific cultural gestures and language and other things. I wanted you to talk a little bit more about that, but also about the fact that you got to actually work with two people in the same space, and you created a beautiful space. Can you just talk about that, just those elements a little bit for me, please?
Sure. Yes, the team, I was very lucky that I knew these two amazing artists, both of whom are great collaborators as well as very expensive theatrical and visual artistic thinkers in their own right, Mariam and Aisha. And they are obviously in the same corona bubble as a mother and a daughter, and they were comfortable with being in the same location. So it was very magical to have a brief period of almost normalcy, as we got to actually be together in a theatrical space, following all kinds of COVID protocols, but ultimately having that face to face interaction. It felt like a strange time travel in many ways, remembering instances when we could actually relate in this way, and also made me very hopeful and very enthusiastic to do whatever is in our power, as a community of artists and a community of citizens of the United States, to figure out how to get there sooner.
They were very specific. You had the candle, you had the oil. I don't know, there were just some specific touches that I was wondering how some of that came to be. Were they your ideas, how the sand came down, those I guess it was an oil lamp, and I don't know. It's just I seemed when I watched it, I really was in this cave-like dwelling, the sandy, and from a really different world, and the lighting was beautiful. So I just really appreciate the amount of detail that went into this work among the three of you.
Yeah, and it was a very collaborative experience amongst me and the actors, and also our cinematographer and film editor Barrett Doyle, and then including the sound designer David Crandall, who also used a lot of humming of some folk songs that the actresses had recorded, as well as his own underscoring and compositional ideas. A lot of the collection of ideas that you ended up seeing were rooted in the poetic heart of what Jacob had written, and very much expanding and personalizing on some of the beautiful images that he had crafted. And it was a process of basically figuring out, within this given circumstance that is as real and devastating as it is poetic, of these two women that are trapped in this mass grave, and figuring out how and whether to try to escape, knowing the costs that may come with that attempt. Who had created ultimately this psychic container for their connection to happen, this little pocket of the world where they could be safe and they could be comfortable. So it was a combination of us proposing ideas for how to make that space feel very sparse ultimately, and like it was floating in the black void of whatever extra mind space this connection was happening in, as well as things that we knew would make the actors feel comfortable and feel connected.
Yeah, it was really, really well done. So I'm gonna finish the big questions with you, Jacob. So this is a very serious piece. You say that you work a lot in comedy and bring the international flavors. So how do these? Just tell me, this isn't the first dark play you've written, but talk about how it relates to your other work, and what kind of, just tell me about a little bit more about the other kind of work that you do.
Yes, definitely. So as I mentioned, normally I'm focusing on writing comedies, and every line is building toward a punchline. And so this was very much outside of my comfort zone immediately, because I knew right away that it wouldn't be this sort of play. But in the context of my other work, I think I think there are several related elements. The play that was set to premiere in Sacramento last year, which was not due to the pandemic, it's called Proclivity for Kiting, is a comedy about totalitarianism. And I wrote it in 2017 when a lot of, I was very disturbed by some of the things related to the technological surveillance state that we've started to create here at home. And so all of my plays seem to focus on that darker element of government, domestic, foreign policy. And I would also say it's really a through line in my writing. I'm sort of addicted to bureaucrat speak. I think there's something really, really fascinating about the way people might write a memo or might speak at a press conference. And so another one of my plays, which was at New Jersey Repertory Company, a short play about our political experience. I wrote it in the context of the not the most recent elections, but the ones before that. And it took place in a decrepit circus tent. And it was these two out of work circus, people who were basically making political attacks on each other, sort of as a symbol of our own broken political system. And so these things are the things that I grapple with. And I think for this piece, I am so grateful that I was able to have Beth and these two incredible actors ground what I was grappling with in this real sort of human sense of the personal, because that's, I think, what the three of them did.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. That's really true. I'd like to ask if anybody wants to tell me what they're working on next, what the future brings for them, or what we're hoping to accomplish. Do you have, are you working on something, Jacob?
At the moment, I'm not working on anything in particular. I'm going back and examining some old plays, trying to see if they can be repurposed for our current predicament, but nothing at the moment.
You know, it's probably an unfair question because this year has been really, not just because there's not a lot of work, but it's a work, and since day after day after day, everything's so much the same. I think the creative part of us, there's a transition about how we find our new projects, what we're longing to do. So anybody can jump in if they have something they want to say about what's up next or what they're working on.
I'm really excited about exploring that place where sort of civic dialogue crosses over with art making. And I think we're at a place where moving to, like, I don't know, in my hippie parents' 60 version, happenings may be kind of the next place that I feel like theater really needs to go if we're going to continue to be of service and relevant in our communities, So I'm just super interested in those things. I've got a couple, things I'm making happen about essential workers, about public mourning, which is something I think Americans just resist, and I think we'll suffer if we don't do it. And then also looking at some of the things that happened in 2020 that didn't get celebrated, like the 19th Amendment, 100-year anniversary. And so just thinking about things like that are really interesting to me. And then, of course, I've got the long list of all the canceled projects that have been postponed, but we're not even going to talk about them.
No, it's so painful. So painful.
Yeah.
So, Rob, do you have anything that you're longing to do?
Well, I'm one of those people prior to 2020 who constantly said, I wish I just had time, right? I wish I just had time to sit and write and create, and I've had a lot of that now. So I'm ready to get back to work and get busy again. But this was a good time to reflect, and History of Love is the product of that, and the noir piece that we were talking about, and a couple other things that I've had some time to meditate on and flesh out a little bit more, but brighter horizons are ahead, and I'm excited to see what's coming. Yeah.
I've been asking this question to all the playwrights, and some of them when earlier it was, no, they're too stunned. And now people their minds are just starting to kind of unfreeze, it seems. And Beth, you have anything in store for you?
Yeah, well, I'm very fortunate to be teaching in this time. Definitely, there's a lot of Zoom freezes and other technical difficulties that get in the way, but there is nothing more hope of in life affirming ultimately than working with younger people who are still very committed to expanding their capacity for compassion and their artistic toolkits. So that has been wonderful. I am also working on another film theater project that starts filming next week. Actually, it's called Cracking Zeus. And it's through the Alliance Theater's digital theater channel. And it's a play about that basically intersects Greek mythology and the crack epidemic in a very urban setting centered around a church. So it's about all the different things that we are addicted to, whether that be drugs or revenge or wanting to be loved and accepted, and all the ways in which those can lead to a downfall, certainly in the very Grecian tragic sense, but also to our imaginings of new horizons and new places that we could go.
Wow. So it's thank you for that. It's exciting to hear you guys talk about work and what work means to you and what the future in your work is, what you're thinking about for the future. It's really, really beautiful. So I thank you all for talking to us for a little while and for producing such beautiful work for us to watch. Thanks so much.